Welcome to my 194th video on my work with OO gauge. This part will deal with a third LMS Coronation Class Duchess for 3-rail tabletop railway. This one badged as the Duchess of Montrose using Fox transfers, etched plates and HMRS Pressfix decals. You'll have to excuse me a bit today, I'm not too well. Before I get on to the primary subject of this video, just a quick digression. I did decide to place the metal tunnel and the slightly foxed signal cabin that I bought at the Kitchener train show last weekend onto the tabletop, at least experimentally. But now I think I'm inclined to leave them there. As you can see, I put the metal tunnel over the middle of the reversing loop, and I put the foxed signal cabin between the goods depot and the station end of the reversing loop, where it can control the station signals, etc. The metal tunnel is a bit ridiculous in a way, of course, but I do think that it has a certain charm, for me anyway. And the signal cabin basically looks fine to me, even though it does have quite a few chips out of its paint. Really, that damage to the paintwork doesn't strike me as an issue, seeing it by the tracks like that. So I think I'm just going to leave it as it is. The tabletop as a whole is rather cluttered now, I suppose, but I think I can live with it. Indeed, I may well place a few more small items here and there, though there really isn't room for anything else large. I would have loved to have had a 3-rail turntable, but I came to the conclusion quite a way back in my planning that trying to fit a turntable on a table this small would just constrict the other things too much. Anyway, now back to the main subject of this part, my third Duchess, shades of Robert Browning. When I took delivery of a third Dublo Duchess of Atholl model, I wanted to check out its performance first before I started any cosmetic work on it. On the back there, I have yet another Duchess of Atholl. The loco nearer to us is my original Duchess of Atholl, the one that I got with the train set, but the one on the back is yet another Duchess of Atholl that I picked up, which, like the second one I picked up, which I made into the Duchess of Buccleuch, I'm planning to rebadge, but let's try and just do a running proof of it before that. He touched the tunnel there, I think. I may need to let me just stop him a moment and check the tunnel again. Very tricky it is to run these large locos through the tunnel. You got to get the tunnel really well centered, else the buffers of the loco will hit the side of the tunnel. After I adjusted the tunnel by heat reforming its ends, it is possible to get them through and to get coaches through. But you've got to be careful that the tunnel is centered, and that is 28%. 28% on the 28% thereabout on the Gauge Master controller. So he is running pretty well with relatively little power. So I think we can say he's a runner. Let's just try him, whoops, backwards. I turned him up when I meant to turn him down there. That's about the same amount of power, 28% backwards. Not sure whether he'll run over all the points without derailing backwards. Sometimes the tenders of these things can be a bit iffy, going backwards over points. Here you go, he's gone all the way around backwards, and that's again at about 28%. Very good. So I think we can say that's a nice proof of running with him. He's got a nasty scratch on the side of his tender, and also I want to rename and renumber him, but, might as well make sure he runs properly first, and yes, he does seem to run properly, or she seems to run properly, I suppose, a Duchess. I have a tendency to refer to locos as male for some reason, but this is a Duchess. Oh, and the clocks are chiming. So there you go. Oh, it's only the Westminster clock chiming. Oh. Another Duchess. One of the first things that I wanted to do was something about this rather nasty scratch on the side of the tender. I buffed it a little bit with a felt pad in a rotary tool, but that didn't really seem to help much. I used a gold marker to touch up where the gold of the lettering was missing, and then I tried to touch up the paint with a fine brush. I'd mixed some black into this British crimson previously to bring it as close as I could to matching the colour used on the Dublo Duchesses. It wasn't really possible to achieve invisible mending on a scratch like this, but I did my best. Here's that side of the tender after my repairs. It might get a little better when the paint dries thoroughly. Hopefully the damage won't be too noticeable when running on the tracks. I removed the chassis from the body before starting work with decals and plates. It's just easier to handle the body when it's lighter and I don't have to worry about valve work, bogies, etc. Here's a close-up of the original painted Duchess of Atholl plate on one side of the model. And here's the original 6231 number on that side of the cab. Here's the nameplate on the other side of the loco. And the number on that other side. Now, a few words about what I'd chosen to do with this model. The short version is that I'd decided to rename and renumber it as the Duchess of Montrose, but I think a bit more explanation than that is worthwhile. The first 10 locomotives of the LMS Coronation Class were built in 1937 and 1938 and went into service like this, with streamlining. The first locomotive of the Coronation Class to go into service without streamlining was the Duchess of Buccleuch, which was completed in June 1938. This loco went into service like this, with no streamlining, no smoke deflectors, and finished in LMS Crimson livery. 4 more locos were built and went into service like this in the summer of 1938, for a total of 5, all named as Duchesses: Duchess of Buccleuch, Duchess of Atholl, Duchess of Montrose, Duchess of Sutherland, and Duchess of Abercorn. These locos were numbered consecutively from 6230 to 6234. After those locos, another series of Coronation Class engines were built with streamlining, named for cities. Note that all of these engines, whether streamlined or unstreamlined, and whether named for duchesses or cities or whatever, were all considered by the LMS to be members of a single class, since they were essentially mechanically identical. This class was first called the Princess Coronation Class, later simplified just to the Coronation Class. Referring to some of them as Duchess Class and some as City Class seems pointless and confusing to me, though it has often been done, notably by Wren with their models. Anyway, when Hornby first planned the model of the Coronation Class in Dublo, they chose to model the Duchess of Atholl, the second of the group of unstreamlined engines built in 1938, and Hornby made their plans just after the real loco had gone into service. But the outbreak of World War II intervened, the Meccano factory in Liverpool switched to war work, and the Duchess of Atholl model didn't actually become available until after Dublo production resumed in 1947. When I obtained my second Dublo Duchess of Atholl model, I renamed and renumbered it as the first of the unstreamlined batch of 1938, 6230 Duchess of Buccleuch. Now, coming to work with a third unstreamlined smoke deflectorless Coronation Class model, I decided to rename and renumber it as the third of the 1938 summer batch, the Duchess of Montrose. Now, of course, Hornby themselves did make a model of the Duchess of Montrose, but this model, released in 1953, only appeared in British Railways green livery with smoke deflectors, which had been added to the real locomotive just after the end of the war. What I intended to do was to model the Duchess of Montrose as it originally went into service with the LMS in 1938. in crimson livery and without smoke deflectors, by simply renaming and renumbering a Dublo Duchess of Atholl model. I decided to work on the cabside numbers first. I intended to use HMRS Pressfix decals for gold loco and coach insignia. Here's something of a view of what is included in this Pressfix set. Quite a variety of things, including numbers of several sizes for both crimson and black liveries. Unfortunately, due to the variety of number types included, not a great many of any particular colour and size are available. I tried to measure the original numbers on the loco body, and then to compare that to the available sizes in the Pressfix set. It seemed that the largest size was the closest match, but in hindsight this was probably a mistake. But last time I used the next size down and the numbers looked too small. I had bought plates for this conversion from Fox Transfers. They're a great source. They do a really good job and they cover the sort of things that I want to do very well. Because I wanted to model the Duchess of Montrose as originally built, I opted for steel plates with a black background, and I requested the large size for early Hornby models, which is important as the more accurately sized plates for later models would not fit well over the plates on the Dublo model. You can see here that the frame on the nameplates is labelled clearly Early Hornby only. The small plate at the top right is a number for the smokebox door, which is very helpful as this will look better than what I could achieve with decals. I went straight to using methyl hydrate to remove the original numbers, since I found from previous experience that this will work and nothing else I've tried did work on Dublo numbers. I gently rubbed with a cotton bud soaked in methyl hydrate until the coloured paint of the numbers was removed. This did leave a sort of shadow where the numbers were, but I thought it was best to leave it at this as I didn't want to remove the crimson paint. Here's the other side of the cab after removal of the original number. I did remove the entire numbers this time rather than trying to just replace the last digit, as the decals will never quite match the original numbers. As I said, in hindsight, I think I was wrong to use the largest size of digits. I could barely fit the number on the side of the cab with these. I would have been better to have used the next size down, even if it might have seemed a bit too small. Next, I moved on to applying the plates. I knew from previous experience that it was going to be very difficult to detach these plates from their frames. They're made of steel and it's extremely hard and difficult to cut with anything. The small plate for the smokebox door is not too bad, as it's not surrounded by a frame but just attached on one side by quite thin connections which can be accessed with snippers. By snipping and then bending, I managed to detach that plate. I did get marked pieces of the connections left. The Fox instructions say to use a file to remove these, but though this works well with brass plates, it's hard to achieve much with a very hard steel. I sanded down the place for the plate on the smokebox door a bit, and then stuck the plate on using a very small amount of CA glue applied with the tip of a toothpick. Next, I needed to get the main nameplates out of their frame. Having worked with Fox steel plates before, I went straight to what worked before. The Fox instructions say to cut the plates out with a knife. That will work for brass plates, so long as you cut on a solid surface such as a stone or a steel ruler, but I've found that these steel plates are utterly impossible to cut with any kind of knife. So I went straight to what I ended up doing before, very carefully cutting through the frame using a cutting disc and a rotary tool. Once the frame has been cut through on both sides, I did my best to score the connections on the end with a large sharp knife and then bent the end of the frame back and forth until the connections snapped. This is the knife that I used on the connections. I tried a smaller craft knife first, but had no success with it, so I went to a big carpet knife. But I still couldn't actually cut through the connections, even using maximum pressure with this knife against a steel ruler. So I cut through the frame with the rotary tool and then bent the end back and forth until the connection snapped. That way I removed the two ends of the frame. Next I just had to remove the remaining pieces of frame, again by trying to cut with the knife on the steel ruler and then bending back and forth until the connection snapped. Finally I just had to separate the two plates the same way, doing my best to cut with the knife, then bending back and forth. I did try to clean up the plates using a file, but it was very hard to make much impression on the steel, and of course I had to be very careful to avoid damaging the plates themselves. I tried the fox plates against the sides of the model. They fitted well over the height of the original markings, but they were rather longer than the original Duchess of Atholl markings, so they needed to go beyond a small amount at each end. Here is the first plate stuck in place. And here's the second. I tried to apply a very small amount of CA glue all along the length with the tip of a toothpick, but even applying a minimal amount I still got too much, so glue was squished out from the sides when I pressed down the plate. I did my best to clean up with a cotton bud. Here's one side of the body with the new plate and number. And here's the other side. I did spray with accelerator after CAing the plates on, and the body is still a bit wet with that here. I put the chassis back into the body. The original nut for the fixing screw had been replaced with this rather odd nut and washer. Here's the loco with its tender on the bench after my efforts. And here's a closer view just of the loco. Here's the new number plate on the smoke box door. Here's the other side of the loco and tender. I got the model onto my 3-rail tracks for some running in its new identity. So here's my Duchess of Montrose on my Dublo tabletop, but this is not the Duchess of Montrose as Hornby made it. Of course, Hornby made a Duchess of Montrose, but that was, I think, only in BR green with smoke deflectors. And this is really a Hornby Duchess of Atholl that I've put Duchess of Montrose number and plates on. So this is the Duchess of Montrose as it was originally built in 1938 in crimson with no smoke deflectors and of course LMS. So let's see how it goes. That's just about 30% power, so I can't complain about that. I did try the loco, of course, before I did the replating and things, because I figured if it needed servicing I'd do that first, but it really didn't particularly. Well, I'm quite happy with that as performance for an old Duchess of Atholl as it was. But so now I've got three. There were four Duchesses built in 1938. The first one's built without streamlining, the first of the Coronation Class without streamlining, and they were all called Duchesses. Duchess of Buccleuch, Duchess of Atholl, Duchess of Montrose, and I think the fourth was the Duchess of Rutland. Obviously I don't have reference material with me at the moment. It's Rutland or Sutherland, the fourth one. I'll check. You know already, I expect, but I'm filming, videoing, running here, so... Okay, so let's stop this now and let's a bit further up, and we'll get some coaches out and run it with a couple of coaches, all being well. Okay, so now I've got the Duchess of Montrose coupled up to a couple of LMS mainline coaches. These are actually a couple of new coaches that I bought on eBay UK, so these haven't been featured in video before. I'm afraid one of them has a bit of a dent in its roof, and I had a bit of trouble coupling them, although actually that wasn't the coach's fault. I don't think it was because the the coupling on the back of the tender of the Duchess of Buccleuch was bent in a little too tightly and couldn't manage to join with the coach. So let's see. We know, of course, there's always a bit more risk of derailing when you've got coaches as well as a loco on the old Hornby three-wheel track, but we live in hopes. We're managing to get the coaches through the tunnel. That tunnel's rather critical. You've got to keep it just, exactly right, the same distance on the left and right side of the track, because the buffers of the loco will tend to hit it on the outside of the track, but the centres of the coaches will tend to hit it on the inside of the track. See what I mean? Centres of the coaches are very close to the tunnel on the inside, and the buffers of the loco stick out on the front. Let's just, I was going to say stop him. It'd be nice if we could stop him where you could see things, but it's a bit hard to do. Getting past the point there. Maybe we'll just stop him there so we can have a look. I guess you can't see the loco so well there, but you can see the coaches. They're quite nice looking coaches. They're not the old ones with the painted on windows, they're the ones with the cut out, but they are LMS coaches. So they're sort of whatever, pre-1953 when they switched to just doing VR livery. They are actually, I didn't convert them, they actually were originally LMS coaches from Hornby, and they do have, at least one of them does anyway, had the LMS roundel on it. That one has the LMS roundel on it in the middle. I don't think the other one does, actually, for some reason, whether it had it and it's come off or it never had it, it seems. But the front one, the one with the dent in its roof, does actually have an LMS roundel on it. Okay, let's just run round a little bit more if we can. Again, that's about 30% power. I didn't really increase the power at all for the train, so he's not having any trouble pulling those two coaches. Which of course means the coaches themselves must be running okay, else he would be having trouble running them. So there you go. I now have 3 out of the 4 Duchesses that were built in 1938. Buccleuch, Atholl and Montrose. And as I say, I can't right now even remember what the 4th was. I'm pretty sure it was either Rutland or Sutherland. But, really need all these Duchesses, but still. And I certainly can't complain about the running of this one. I think it's doing quite a nice job. Maybe I'll just leave it there for now. Just for now. I'll leave it on the track there out at the back. That's my original Duchess of Atholl in front of it with the TPO coach.